So we are joined today by Edward Clark, Chief Executive Officer of Nauru's Economic and Climate Resilience Citizenship Program. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us today.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here today.
We're very honored to have you here. So, Edward, we just wanted to understand, as we know that the program was established recently last year, and a lot of people are really excited and interested about this program. We could see a lot of information online, and people, since you are here, it would be glad to hear it straight from the source. Can you please tell us more about the program?
Absolutely. Well, what information do you want to know about?
How does one qualify for the program?
All right, that's a good place to start.
Yes.
So I guess in terms of eligibility or
Yes.
Qualifications as well, firstly you need to have the minimum amount in order to actually make the contribution. So there is a contribution and fees that are part of the application process. And if your application is successful in terms of contribution to the government, so you'd certainly need to be able to fund the application and contribution. And then in terms of eligibility, we're really looking at whether the individual is, a good quality candidate.
Of course.
The most obvious things that you look for. Have they been convicted in the past? Are they from a jurisdiction that is prohibited or restricted? And we have some restrictions around which countries you can apply from. Are you a sanctioned individual or are you on a terrorist watch list? Is there any news out there that would potentially indicate that you might not get your application approved?
Adverse media records.
Any kind of adverse media. Yeah. So those are the kind of things that we look for at a very base level in terms of eligibility. There are also a lot of really odd nuances as well. Now Nauru is quite a religious country. So we often, in the Middle East, there are relationships, for example, where someone might have multiple wives.
Yeah.
So we've been asked the question before, could we accept an application like this? And because Nauru does not recognize polygamous relationships as an example, that's not something that we could support as a family application, and that the multiple wives wouldn't be treated as dependents. That being said, there's nothing stopping the other wives applying as an individual,
of course.
In their own right.
Like in a separate application.
In a separate application. Of course, that will be much more costly from a client's perspective.
Yep.
Now, these are obviously very niche cases.
Yeah.
But those that's just a kind of an example in terms of some of the things that we look at. And I realize that many people have unique circumstances, and so what I do encourage is just to have a dialogue with us in terms of what might be acceptable or not in terms of the circumstances that we're dealing with. And often we'll work with agents such as Knightsbridge in terms of providing guidance as to whether someone might be eligible or not. All you can do is ask.
Yes. Well, it's really important to have the conversation with your chosen agent and have the honesty and have that discussion so that obviously the application is being processed smoothly. And we're very glad that we have experienced that with you, and we're very happy with you and the team of them being very efficient when it comes to the communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think that the point that you raised around making sure that, you set expectations up front.
Absolutely.
In terms of, firstly, the level of due diligence that we go through and what we expect, and also that is communicated to the client. And what I find by doing that is ultimately you're going to make the process easier. We do go through a lot of due diligence. We do go into a lot of detail in terms of the applicant's source of wealth and source of funds, associations that they have, business interests that they have. We have had cases, as an example, where we identified an applicant with business interests that weren't declared. Not for any nefarious reason. It was just a small or previous directorship that an individual had, but it wasn't disclosed. But it just raises questions.
For sure, yep.
In terms of why was this not disclosed. It's something that we need to then understand and potentially mitigate against before we progress with the application. So the more information that is actually shared up front, the better.
Yep.
Because as soon as something is uncovered that we weren't aware about, then it just leaves a bit of a question mark over the application. So it's much better to be transparent and upfront.
Yeah, and of course part of the process is also undergoing an interview, correct?
Correct, that's right. And we, of course, will use that interview to dig into any details that we want to understand more about. So it will depend on the what is identified during the due diligence in terms of what is actually covered off in that interview. But that interview can be done remotely. It doesn't need to be done in person. The interview can be done in your local language. So we do try and make it as user-friendly as possible.
Speaking about the whole process, could you share a little bit of information or a lot of information about the timeline one can expect?
Yeah, I mean, the timeline is an interesting one because it depends on when you start the clock, and when we start the clock is not necessarily when the client starts the clock.
Of course.
So I'll talk a little bit about the whole process and what that involves, and then I'll talk a little bit about what that timeline might look like. So the first step, obviously, for anyone interested is they need to identify an agent to work with. So in order to submit an application, it must be submitted through a licensed agent of the program, such as Knightsbridge. So you firstly need to identify who you want to work with to submit your application. They will then, of course, do their own due diligence on you and will potentially sign you on as a client. I don't know exactly your process and what that involves, but I imagine that is the first step for most applicants. Then it's a matter of gathering all the documentation. And again, without having been on the agent side, I don't know exactly how long this will take for a client to actually gather all the information they need to submit an application.
Collection.
But with all of the documents required, depending on the complexity of the case, I envisage it might take 1 to 2 months to get that documentation together and submit it through to our office. Now, provided that everything is in order, when we receive that application and there are no back and forth in terms of that documentation, then we will issue an acceptance letter we will invoice the agent for the application fee and due diligence fee, and issue an acceptance letter of that application once we've received those fees. We do some due diligence before we accept the application. We want to have a base level of due diligence conducted, and we want to have a reasonable idea that the case is going to be approved. Of course, there are things that might be uncovered later on in terms of the due diligence that might change that, but at least we want to check, for example, is there any adverse media about the individual that might be an obvious one to say no to? Are they on any sanctioned list, terrorist list, any previous, I guess adverse information that is obvious, right? So that's the important first step, and we also look at the negative news, any social media, if we can identify as well, just to get an idea of the individual's profile. Once we accept the application, then due diligence goes to the Nauru Police for police clearance, and it goes to the Financial Intelligence Unit. And we also work with a number of external due diligence providers who will go and do background verification checks on the information that has been provided. And this involves looking at, your business interests. It involves doing background, open source checks, but then also potentially behind closed doors in terms of discrete reference checks.
And sorry, Edward, and all of the applicants also 16 and above will also undergo a due diligence check, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
So that would be part of the process as well.
That's right. So, and in doing so, what we're able to do is we're able to verify the information that has been provided to us, and we're able to build up a bit of a profile in terms of either the business interests, but most important for us is understanding where the applicant has gained their wealth from and where the source of the funds has come from. Now, once we've completed the due diligence process, and that will typically take, I want to say 6 weeks all up in terms of completing that due diligence, probably between a month and 6 weeks. Once we do that, we then form a view on the risk and that the individual might pose to the government, and we write a recommendation to the government for seeking a approval in principle. And it's only at that point where the approval in principle is granted, if it's approved, that the applicant is then required to pay the contribution through to the government.
Yeah.
Once that contribution is paid, then you need to complete the oath of allegiance and complete passport forms and send in the details that are required for the printing of your passport. That passport will be printed and will be sent to the agent to pass to the client. I anticipate that process will take around 1 month, but again, because we are a new program, we actually haven't gone through that yet.
Of course.
So this is based on my current best guess in terms of how long that will take. What I would say in terms of the overall processing time, we do advertise or commit to a processing time of around 4 months.
That's very good.
We accepted our first applications. Actually, we started the dialogue around the end of February, but actually I was looking at the actual timeframes, and we didn't send that acceptance letter to the agent. Excuse me. We didn't send that acceptance letter to the agent until mid-February. We are now mid-March. Let me correct that. We sent the acceptance letter mid-March. We are now mid-May, and I have just submitted the first 2 recommendations to the government for the approval in principle. So if we're measuring from the point where we accept the application through to the point where we're looking for an approval in principle, you're looking at 2.5 months. And this is the first time we've actually gone through this process. So for us, there have been a few teething issues and a few delays. So I expect that this processing time will decrease by a few weeks potentially.
Well, it's amazing because obviously you just started the program. It was just recently established. And by looking at it, as you mentioned, it was a new thing for everyone. There are a lot of, logistics to do and all those arrangements. And we're still looking at a timeline, a very relatively amazing timeline, 3 to 4 months, or even be less than that is good,
Yeah, look, we'll see. I mean, it's still early days, I would say.
Of course,
we could obviously be crippled by incredibly high volumes. I'm grateful that the interest that we've got at the moment is at the right level where it gives us time to adjust and resolve some of those issues before we get maybe overwhelmed. So it's quite useful that I'm happy with where the volumes are at today.
That's amazing. Well, Edward, I want to ask you about the specifics on the direct contribution to the government's treasury fund, which is the amazing name. Thank you so much for teaching me how to pronounce it. It was really helpful.
It's a mouthful. It is.
Yeah, so the Economic and Climate Resilience Citizenship Program.
Correct.
Yeah, can you tell us more about it? I know that it could, obviously, and the investor and an applicant would always obviously help boost the economy of the country. So could you tell us more about that?
So you want to know what the contribution amounts are?
Yes, and obviously what are these fees for, or who are the beneficiary of these fees?
So firstly, in terms of the contribution amount, it is at an entry level, $105,000 US. That does increase slightly depending on the number of family members involved in the application. So if it's a family of 4, that contribution amount increases to 110, and then 115 for a larger family size. That contribution amount will go towards an initiative called the Higher Ground Initiative, or it will be parked aside essentially for the government to use for economic or climate-related infrastructure projects. So it may be directly related to the Higher Ground Initiative, or it might be other, I would say, ancillary projects that support the overall delivery of the Higher Ground Initiative. An example might be maybe an investment in waste management that the island needs, regardless of whether it's specific to the Higher Ground Initiative or not. So everything is intended to be a climate-related initiative or project. We're working with the government at the moment to set up a committee to oversee how those funds are being used, and we do have an annual reporting requirement, which we have put on ourselves to share how the funds are being used. So we want to report very transparently around how those funds are being used. And this is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, it enables us to clearly communicate to clients or potential clients that the funds that they contribute to the government are used in the right way.
Of course.
And that is really important. It helps protect the integrity of the program as well,
Of course.
to make sure that we have the right controls in place to ensure that the funds that are raised are not misappropriated, by government officials, as an example. So making sure that we've got those right protections in place also help with the overall integrity of the program and give confidence to people that are interested in applying.
It's very good. So we've talked about amazing timeline, 3 to 4 months. Talked about one of the amazing options when it comes to cost. What are the other key benefits? I mean, how is Nauru different from other alternatives, alternative citizenship program out there?
I think you should be the one telling me why it's different. I don't have that experience in terms of marketing other programs. Look, I'll tell you what I think is good about our program. I can't necessarily compare it to others because there's a lot of nuances out there. And I would say each and every person's reasons for applying can be quite varied and different.
Very well said.
But what is good about our program? Yes, the processing time is good. For anyone that is potentially making a contribution, you are making a contribution for a very good cause, which for some people is quite a compelling reason to make a contribution. And for such a small island, that contribution amount actually makes a material impact. In a good way.
It is in a good way.
From a passport perspective, it is a I guess, politically neutral passport. It has access to, from memory, 88 visa-free access to 88 countries. But of course, for some people, the passport can be used to help them to apply for a visa in another country as well, that maybe they have challenges to just by the fact of where they reside in. That access includes United Kingdom, it includes Singapore, it includes Hong Kong and the UAE as well as many other countries. And again, your interest in that access may vary,
of course,
depending on where you're based. So for example, there are Chinese clients, for example, that are more interested in visa-free access to Taiwan, as an example, or maybe Guam or Saipan, as quite obscure territories that they want access to, which they can't, but actually they have a need or a want to.
Yeah.
So it can vary a lot. I think in terms of some of the other benefits, you don't need to travel to the island to obtain citizenships. Everything can be done remotely.
Yes.
We have quite an expansive approach in terms of the number of family members that you can include in the application. And family members can also be included after the fact, meaning that they can be added to the application after the original application has been made. So, for example, if you have a child born or grandchild born after the original application was, or the original citizenship was granted, then they can also benefit from that. We do allow sponsorship of applications as well. So, for example, maybe you're a business and you have an executive or top performing manager that you want to sponsor their citizenship for because it enables them to travel to different countries to do business more easily. So a business may want to sponsor the application, or it might be a family trust, or it might be the main applicant's own business that he operates that then wants to make that. So there are, I guess it just opens up in terms of where the financial contribution comes from for the application.
Yeah, and I believe nowadays the world is revolving and content. I mean, the content thing in the world has changed, and if one has a source of funds from crypto, that would be acceptable as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. So source of funds, the source of wealth being cryptocurrency is of course acceptable, provided that we can verify the information and we're comfortable with the risks. Then there's no reason why that can't be. We still do have to receive the funds in fiat currency, in US dollars.
Yeah.
So we're not at the point yet where we accept direct payment in cryptocurrency. Will that be something that we look at in the future? Well, actually, we're looking at that now, but we haven't made a decision to put in place something like that yet. We want the current program as it is to be a bit more established and get some runs on the board, so to speak, before we look at potentially expanding into areas like that. But I think in terms of where the industry is at, and cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is here to stay.
Yeah.
And it is something that we should definitely consider. And I think some programs are starting to open up to accepting payment in cryptocurrency. Some of the things that I think about, there are some real benefits as well, because I think about it also from a banking perspective and transaction monitoring. When you're looking at a blockchain transaction, you can actually see the entire end-to-end in terms of where the funds have come from and as they've passed hands. Whereas from a banking perspective, we do transaction monitoring. We just see the money coming in and we see it going out. So I worked at HSBC in New Zealand and we didn't have a very good transaction banking platform. So all I used to see was big funds of money coming from a same name account in Hong Kong. So Mr. Smith, for example, in Hong Kong paid to Mr. Smith in his New Zealand account. And then that money went to Mr. Smith in his maybe, Australian bank. And I couldn't see anything really.
For sure.
I just saw the money coming in and going out very quickly, but it was all, perfectly explanatory. So there are actually some real benefits from a compliance perspective in looking at cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I just think, at the moment, we need to build up our understanding of how to, we need to just build up our understanding of cryptocurrency and what the actual risks are to us. And then find, the right partners from a banking perspective who can facilitate that. The other thing that's, I think, challenging with cryptocurrency is the volatility of certain coins as well.
Right.
or certain cryptocurrencies. And so how do we make sure that the government continues to receive the same amount as what they would if it was in fiat?
Yeah.
So would we look at like a stable coin option and that kind of thing? I don't know. We're not there
Well, at
yet,
least you're
but
still,
we're thinking about it.
yeah,
at least.
of course, at least. And speaking about, looking for, not ending or not stopping because you feel that the program is really successful, and I feel that it is. Do you have any talks about having a visa waiver agreement with other countries as well?
Look, this is not something that our program office is responsible for, but we are aware that the Department of Foreign Affairs is actively engaging with other jurisdictions to seek additional visa waivers, and that's obviously just part of building out bilateral relationships between the two countries as well.
It's amazing.
So we'd love to see that expanded. Whether it can be achieved or not, I don't know.
Well, we hope for the best.
We hope for the best.
Yes.
There is some interesting, some interesting nuances in recent news in relation to visa access in New Zealand, actually, which is where I'm from.
Yeah.
But this is a kind of odd one. There is a quasi visa-free access to New Zealand. So if you obtain a visa to Australia, then you can then travel visa-free into New Zealand with a Nauru passport. So it's a bit of a weird one. It's not direct. I call it a kind of quasi-semi visa-free access, but that was announced off the back of the recent Pacific Island Forum.
That's amazing. Well, I've also done my research. Nauru is, if I'm not mistaken, third or fourth smallest country.
It is the third? The smallest country in the world and the smallest island nation in the world. The two that are smaller are, do you know?
No.
Vatican and
yes.
Monaco.
Wow. Yeah. Have you been? Of course, you've been to Nauru.
I've been to Nauru, yes.
Yeah. Well, this is
if you're fast, you can run around it in 2 hours.
I will try. Well, Edward, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here and joining us today. And we're very honored. We're going to see you soon. Hopefully, you're going to come back to Dubai.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back to Dubai again.
Yeah, and I hope you had a wonderful experience in Dubai and with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, Jim.
Thank you.